You know, here in Maryland, and in the Chesapeake Bay region, there is one place that people point to, and it's not Baltimore, it's not Washington, D.C., it's not Richmond. It's a very small little town in Prince George's County called Edmonston. Edmonston. And we are joined here tonight by the mayor, who has ended up carving quite a niche for himself, testifying before Congress, appearing with my boss, the former boss, the EP administrator, on many occasions. And we're going to hear tonight about some of their model work in developing greenscapes in their city. Mayor Adam Ortiz.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Chuck, and thank you, staff, and Hillary, and Ryan, and the Funders Network. You've been fabulous, wonderful, and it's my real pleasure to be here tonight. I want to start by saying that we have a tremendous challenge in front of us, tremendous, and I'm not talking about MS4s, I'm not talking about TMDL, I'm not talking about stormwater permits, algae blooms. I'm talking about getting through our last speaker this evening, which is me. Because there's obstacles in front of us, my friends. You know, we have a whole bunch of great speakers that have gone before the final speaker. We're at real risk of food coma breaking out across the room. And we've also endured more than an hour of open bar earlier this evening. So I want you to know that I'm going to stand firm and do my best to deliver. And I want to know if you're with me. Are you with me? Okay, all right. All right, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together. Well, again, it's a pleasure to be here. And I was just asked to just tell a story, tell the story of our community, our very, very little community. And often, Chuck, people don't even get the right amount of syllables right. So, you did that. And some combination of letters that you threw out there was correct if rearranged in the proper way. So we'll take that, man, because nobody knows where we are, who we are, anything. So that's cool. But we appreciate that. But we're going to tell the little story of Edmonston and some of the work that we've done. And when people talk about us, I try to frame it not, our story is not an environmental story, it's a community story. And I think if we're going to be successful in the environmental movement, we have to think of our work as community work. It's about reconceptualizing and rebuilding communities. Because the problems in the Bay don't come from the Bay. It's not like the oysters have waged war on the blue crabs. It's not like that. The problems don't come from there. The problems come from us. The problems come from the places we shop, and the problems come from the farms from which we buy food, and they come from the streets that we drive and walk and pedal on every day. That's where the movement needs to be. And our work isn't necessarily first work about the environment, it's work about community. So with that being said, I'm just going to tell our little story. I have a multimedia presentation, so it's going to be snappy, exciting. There's going to be interpretive dancers that are going to come out shortly. There's going to be flames and fire and laser light shows. So you will get your money's worth, I promise you. But our little town is right there. Got it? Okay. We are on the Anacostia River, which, as you know, flows into the Potomac, which, as you know, flows into the Chesapeake Bay. And that little dot that you see, Edmonston, is actually an exaggeration because we are not that big by scale. But that gives you an idea of where we are located. And just a little bit about our history, because as I said earlier, we need to think about this as community work. It's not just environmental work. And the decisions we make and the places that we live and we shop and grow and spend aren't there by accident. They're there by a confluence of natural, historical, cultural activity. And that's all a part of the work that we need to do. So Edmonston is on the south end of the Riversdale Plantation, and for those of you who may not know, that's the plantation that came to be owned by the Calvert family, one of the founding families of Maryland. Also, Charles Benedict Calvert, gentleman on the left, was a U.S. congressman. He was the first Secretary of Agriculture and also the founder of the University of Maryland. His land grant was the basis for what is now today University of Maryland College Park. But a lot of the work on the plantation, he was a famous horticulturalist and planter, and his whole thing was, we have to do more with less on our lands, we have to be more efficient in our planting. But a lot of the work that was done, he was kind of a fancy guy, big ticket guy, would be at banquets like this all the time. But most of the work that was done on the plantation was done by the gentleman on the right, Adam Francis Plummer, who was his foreman but his slave. And Adam was a very skilled guy who basically ran many parts of the operation on the plantation. Over his time at Riversdale, which was a little more than 20 years, his family tried to escape several times, and they were caught several times and brought back. And as punishment, his family was separated and sold down south as far as New Orleans. After the Emancipation Proclamation, what was left of his family took off to Baltimore because they thought they were free. They didn't understand that it didn't apply to Maryland, which was a Union state, although it held slaves. His family was caught there again, and he was punished along with his wife, and they were separated. But afterwards, there's a happy ending to the story. After the Civil War, Adam continued to work on the farm, and Mr. Calvert let him keep some of his earnings, and in time he bought 10 acres on the southern end of the plantation. And he established a small settlement there, and then spent about 5 years sending his children around the country down the Mississippi to find the family and bring them back home. And they were able, with a lot of success, to find members of their family, women and children and men, and bring them back home and establish a settlement which is today Edmonston. So that's our very humble beginning. Before I go there, just today, and that's an important thread, because our community today still is a working class area. One of the reasons that Adam Plummer was able to purchase the land was because it was on the, at that time, very swampy Anacostia River, lots of mosquitoes. It was on the train tracks, which still exist and keep us up every evening. But it was very affordable. And ever since Mr. Plummer, we have been a gateway, a place like him where people get their foothold on the American dream. We're a home to immigrants, to people buying their first homes, and even today we're very working class. About almost 8% of our residents have a college degree, which is very low for the Washington, D.C. area. There's not a single Volvo or Saab or Mercedes or BMW in town, not one. Not one. And if you have 2 bathrooms in your house, that's a pretty fancy house. And I like to say that we're tremendously diverse. We're about equal parts white, black, and Hispanic. And we're diverse in every way, except we don't have any rich people. We are just completely working class folks, just regular folks. And that's kind of unusual, actually, in the D.C. area. So just a little bit of stuff we all know. Once upon a time, this area, our area, was largely farming, and that was replaced by stuff like this. And of course, that creates tremendous stormwater problems. In our area, about 5 miles in every direction, all of the stormwater from those impervious surfaces come to this little pond right here, which is in Edmonston. And for many years, because of the rate of development and the lack of stormwater protections and just the desire to develop and not be responsible about it, we flooded several times, 4 times in 4 years over the last decade. 3 of those years, I was the mayor, so that's 2005, 6, and 7, and it was tremendously devastating. And being a working class community, a lot of folks rented out apartments in their homes to people to make ends meet. And a lot of those homes, a lot of those rental units were in basements. And as you can see, basements didn't do too well in flood events like this. And some families lost literally everything they had, except what they wore or what they carried out. And one story, just to illustrate, is a woman named Gloria who was in the country legally, trying to get her citizenship. She was studying at Prince George's Community College, taking English classes, and she had raised her son in the country for about 6 years. During one of our flood events, she lost everything, including her papers, which in this climate is terrifying, her transcripts for college, her photo albums, her address book for her family back in Guatemala. So this stuff matters. Stormwater matters. It affects lives tremendously, and it affects the weakest the most. And I think that's stuff we all know. But to the rescue, this thing came flying in one day. What you're looking at here is, does anybody know what this is? And no, you know, don't cheat. You don't. In this limited circumstance, you don't count. Does anybody who did? Yes, sir.
An Archimedes screw.
That's exactly what it is. An Archimedes screw. What does the Archimedes screw do?
Lifts water.
All right, 2 for 2. Basically, that thing is about the size of a bus. It's 10 feet tall and more than 40 feet long. And actually, it's an ancient Greek technology that was invented by the mathematician, philosopher, engineer Archimedes to irrigate and to control flooding in ancient Greece and Rome. And basically, those things move a heck of a lot of water. You get an idea of the scale of it. Those are 2 pictures by the Washington Post. Tim, don't tell them that I didn't credit them during this presentation. But you get an idea of how huge they are. And when those came, our flooding stopped. So we were able to get our stormwater under control, but because other people took shortcuts, taxpayers paid about $8 million for this system in little teeny tiny Edmonston. So there's another view of it. So anyway, we had this devastating experience, but coming together as a community, we're like, okay, what did we learn from this? What can we do differently? What does that mean to us? And like all communities everywhere, you have to fill your potholes, you have to fix your roads, you have to take care of your infrastructure. It's one of the most basic things you can do. So we thought, what can we do differently about our street? And you see in front of me there plans for our main street, Decatur Street, and we basically deconstructed the street from top to bottom and thought, how can we do everything better? How can we do everything more sustainably? How can we do everything more responsibly? So we met. You see pizza is involved. Pizza is key to any successful movement, and we had that ingredient, so I think we've been successful. But basically what we did, as I said, we reconceptualized the street from top to bottom. And this was the street before. It's just kind of a beat-up, homely street, and we thought it over. We thought of every good idea. We stole every possible good idea from coast to coast, and we put them into this plan, and I'll just describe it very briefly. And the street was completed in November, so I couldn't take a real picture because all the leaves were off the trees and it's a little sad looking. So you can use your imagination, but it does actually look something like this. At the number 1 level, we replaced a lot of our ornamental trees with large growth native big canopy trees. So that, as we know, cleans the air, shade, yada, yada, yada. Secondly, and this is important, you see the street lights there. The street lights are lower to the ground, and those are LED lights. We purchased LED lighting, and we entered a wind power agreement with a company called Clean Currents that some of you may know about. And incidentally, the energy that the LED light uses itself is 30% of what the old lights produce, 30%. So massive savings there, and actually the wind power agreement is another 30% cheaper than buying dirty coal energy. So we're saving a ton of money, and we're going to make our money back in probably about 7 years, if not sooner. So we're really excited about that. And in a brilliant shift of engineering, you notice that the light is actually below the tree canopy. And I recommend this because when it's above the tree canopy, the light doesn't get to the street. So you can pass it on. That was tremendous learning for us, but actually nobody had thought of that for 50 years until we discussed it at that table with the pizza that you saw earlier. Other things we did is, as I said earlier, this is a community building opportunity, and our streets are much more than just ways for cars to get from one place to another. They're actually the place that we meet as a community, where we bump into our neighbors, that we get places, that we see the world around us. So they're a connection point. They're a place for people to come together. So we improved the sidewalks. They're wide, ADA compliant, bike lanes, and actually the bike lanes are permeable, so they're absorbing water. And you see number 5, it's pointing to bioretention. On every single block, we have bioretention cells. So they absorb a ton of the water, and I'll get to a little bit later the math. I'm not very good with math, so I need my slide to tell me what the math says. But they're absorbing a ton of the water, preventing flooding, and of course, obviously, creating a beautiful landscape feature. What you'll also notice is that, the street before was very straight. It's kind of a drag strip. Here we've used those bioretention to kind of bump out. So they're slowing cars down as well, and they create a better visual. So they make the street look narrower. So they're performing, each item performs various functions and works together for a complete street. This is the tremendous technology that has revolutionized stormwater management. It's called the curb cut. That's right. Yeah. You can use a saw. You can knock it out with a hammer. But basically, this is what we put on every block into a little landscape. And there's there's a mix of certain organic material and rocks and that sort of thing. But this is basically it. And a lot of us are involved in the stormwater debate. And in Prince George's County, it's a big debate. And, a lot of developers and people are saying, oh my God, it's so terrible. We can't do all this stuff, all this fancy engineering. It's so expensive. That's all it is. It's so easy. Just get a sledgehammer, dig a hole. It's easy. Get over it. So, not the big a deal. So anyway, we have these things all over the town. You see, brilliance here. You see the incline going from left to right. We put the curb cut before the storm drain. So the water goes into the curb cut before the storm drain. That's right. I don't think we were the first to think of that, but it helps. It helps. So there's more pretty pictures. So the Maryland standard, as a lot of you know, is to capture 1 inch of rainfall on 50% of impervious surface. This is the basis through the General Assembly, and counties and Baltimore can come up with more aggressive, but that's the basis. And we did the street some time ago. Our standard is much higher. We capture 1 1/3 inches of rainfall on 90% of impervious surface. Thank you. Thank you. And it was just eminently achievable. All these projects take money, but to do the curb cuts and dig the hole for the water from the curb cuts to go into, and the permeable pavement, which doesn't really cost more than any other pavement, the cost really was negligibly more, probably not that much more, and in the long term, less, because it's less of a burden on the system, it's less flooding, it's just less problems, less mosquitoes, and much prettier. So bottom line, not a big deal. So pass that on if you're in these debates, not a big deal. Look at little tiny old Edmonston. So this is just, I put this really ugly picture in here for a purpose, actually. It's just to show, we had a very limited area to work in. That street was about 130 years old, so the right-of-way was very limited. People talk about how difficult this stuff is in urban areas, but as we looked closer, we found that we had a lot of space, even in this old street, even within the old right-of-way. And you can see kind of the construction taking place where they're digging out bioretention, and you can see how much space is still left for the street. Like what we found was there's being creative and using space efficiently and well, and having multiple purposes for what we're doing. We can achieve all these things. We can really find a way. So anyway, we really want to dispel that notion that, it's really hard in urban areas to be sustainable and it's so expensive, because, we found that none of that was true in our experience. This is just an illustration of look how much room that car has. Look how happy the car is. It's not feeling crowded at all. It's like, it's going to Target or something. It's like, it's happy car. So not a big deal. Okay, one of the things that we did, like our biggest, of course we want to be sustainable and responsible, and that was an objective, but the primary objective of this whole project was to show that it could be done. We're a tiny, tiny little town. We don't have a Legg Mason, we don't have a Constellation Energy in our tax base. We're little guys, little working class guys. And in our regular old capital budget, which is not that big, we were able to pay for this project. In time, Chuck, as you know, we got stimulus funding that ended up paying for everything, so we took that money, of course. But we had paid for it anyway, because remember, we started this process years ago, and when President Obama became president, he asked for shovel-ready projects. Ours was ready to go because we had been working on it for years. So our point is that, if a little town like Edmonston can do this, any town can, and every town should. So what we've done is we've taken all of our plans, and these are engineering drawings for one of the bioretention beds, and we have them online. So as you're working in your communities, large or small, you can refer people to our website. There's all sorts of plans, documents. I don't understand them, but there's somebody out here who does and will benefit from it. So please, take this stuff and steal our ideas. That is our goal for the project. We want people to steal our ideas. Don't have to give us any credit. I want to wrap up in a bit, but before I do, just kind of a few points I wanted to make. This, our project created 60 jobs that didn't exist there before, and these are green jobs. They were green jobs, but not all of them were green contractors before. They got these plans and they said, oh, we've never done this before. We're going to figure out how to do this. Oh, we've never done LED light before. We're going to do that. And now they do that, and now that business is a green business because they can employ green technology. They have the green expertise. So this little project has helped transform and promote the green economy in our little neck of the woods. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. 60% of our dollars went to minority contractors, and 80% of our dollars went to businesses within 10 miles of town. Van earlier said, it's important to build up to politicians and create the political will for politicians, but every politician can show leadership on this stuff. Every politician can make progress, and don't let them get away with doing anything less. All of them, at any level. So anyway, to wrap up, this is an environmental project, but this is a project about building community and building community better. And it starts with the stuff that we do every day, the places that we see, the things that we see and touch every single day, and that's where the change needs to start. And that this is nothing fancy. It's not, we can call it sustainability, we can call it environmentalism, but really it's just responsibility. It's the stuff that we learned as children, that if you make a mess, clean it up. Be responsible for your surroundings. Keep it neat, keep it nice. And that's all it is. So, I always welcome these debates in Prince George's and state of Maryland, any place else, because they're eminently winnable on every single front. And again, if our little tiny town can accomplish a project like this, every place can and every place should. Thank you. Thank you, funders. Thank you, all of you. Appreciate it.